Joined. Look, first, for those who have just joined, thank you for taking some time out of the weekend to join for this webinar. Um, I've got a few clients in the room and also some people who have never met me or never not met me yet. So welcome. I'm Louise. I'm a counsellor, the counsellor and owner here at Cara Counselling in Inaugura, Brisbane. Welcome to my counselling room. Um, where, I basically love to talk all things anxiety and stress and increasingly at the moment, burnout. If you would use the Q&A for any questions, I'll try to keep an eye on it as we're going through. As mentioned in the email out with the link, this is being recorded, but as some or most of you probably know, in the webinar format, we don't know, nobody will know that you're here type thing, hence you can be in your pajamas. And yeah, I think that's all of the business end of things. Oh, I did mention, for anybody who missed it, I did mention that I know I can get excited and talk quite quickly. I have a little sign reminding me to slow down. But if I do speed up and become completely, hard to understand, please pop that into the Q&A or raise your hand and I will slow down again. So we'll kick into some PowerPoints. I really just wanted to throw up the theme, as it were, at the start to remind us why we're here. It's very much about connection. So I'm trying throughout this hour that we're going to spend together to keep bringing us back to that. So the four sort of themes that came up with the Queensland Mental Health Week connection were connecting with self, with community, with others, and with nature. I added in connect with surroundings. It's very similar to connect with self, of course, has some overlap with nature when we're outside, but just connecting with our surroundings, even just doing it now, it's that thing of where am I right now? Noticing the chair supporting us, noticing the ground beneath our feet, noticing, where we are. And it's really that bringing ourselves back to the here and now, being present. And that's a bit of a theme I'll talk about throughout the webinar. So I just wanted to flag that basically there's the four ideas that came directly from Queensland Mental Health Week, and I'm adding in that little connect with your surroundings as something we'll come back to. And the little asterisk is just that reminder for me that that's something we can all do pretty much immediately in the moment. At those times we need a little bit of a calming moment. And I just skipped a slide, so I'll take a breath. What are we doing here? Well, hopefully we know what we're doing here, but I think it's worth asking the question. We're here because it's Queensland Mental Health Week, which is all about being proactive, nurturing and supporting our own mental health and well-being. I suppose implicitly also then supporting and nurturing the health and well-being of those around us, the people in our community. That theme of connection really resonated with me. Something I work with clients on pretty much consistently, it's my thing really, is working on anxiety and stress and overthinking. And as I mentioned, increasingly burnout. It always comes up a bit. I have noticed a little more at the moment. And because there's been that little ramp up of stress and burnout, I did a few recent blogs on self-care and boundaries and burnout. And something that came up with them a lot is self-care and connection. So the theme of connection just resonated with me as something that I talk about so much, and particularly across those areas of stress, anxiety, and burnout. And so today I want us to be proactive. I've got a few slides and then I've got the packed self-care worksheet that I did send out. I hope everybody was able to access it. Kind of don't panic if not, because it's on my website. You can access it really easily. It's just in the courses and resources section. I'm writing myself a little note to add that to the email I send out afterwards, just to make sure everybody's got the worksheet. But so being proactive and connecting and pausing, if we could just now take that pause, take that moment, check in with yourself. What's your why? What is it that you're here for? That could be a feeling that you've had recently, noticing that you're stressed. It could be wanting to learn some new tools. It could be because you're being a bit cranky with friends and family at the minute. Whatever it is, just take that moment to connect with yourself and what's important? What's your why? Why are we here? And I think I've kind of mentioned it, it's probably been picked up. Like why I'm here is this is just something that I'm passionate about. I love working with people on stress, anxiety. I love learning and sharing new tools. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing some stuff today. Now, taking that little moment, I'm going to flick on to the next slide. And now here's where I'm going to be the most amateur. If you can bear with me for a second, at this precise moment on my screen, I can't see if there's any questions. Okay, there aren't. Oh, amateur hour from Louise. Anyway, I'll just flick back into that. And okay, getting back to the correct slide. So we've done what are we doing here, and we're moving on to a bit of that explanation about these different topics that we're covering, the stress, anxiety. I think I've just managed to stop the share, haven't I? Sorry. Need to take a really deep breath, don't I? Okay, getting it back up now. Sorry, folks. Okay, I'm just going to assume that if no questions pop up, they're not there. And going to snooze the thing that's telling me I need to clear my clutter. Isn't that ironic right now? Okay, so stress. Currently feeling it completely. Stress, a feeling of being under pressure, emotional pressure or mental pressure beyond your ability to cope. I can cope with a bit of stress of presenting badly. I just take a few deep breaths. But stress will differ and the causes of stress will differ from person to person. Some people get super stressed by presenting. I walked with a friend yesterday morning who literally stands up in front of, thousands of people and speaks. Don't know how she does it. She breezes through it. A stressful situation for one person will not feel the same necessarily, the same degree of stress as for somebody else. And this is one of the key areas where stress and anxiety differ. Stress actually can be motivating, it can be productive. We feel the stress, we want to take action and move from it, so it will often motivate us to do something. For me, for example, being aware I was doing this webinar this morning and it's important to me. So earlier in the week, I had that little bit of stress of, oh, how will this be? So I started, working on slides and things back on Monday and Tuesday. So that productive part is stress. Now, where stress sort of tips into anxiety and where they differ is anxiety is more future focused. It's that worry or concern in anticipation of a future event. That future event may or may not be real. It's one of those things of something might happen and it's not necessarily going to happen. So that the actual event or the worry or the cause of the anxiety may or may not even occur. It's worrying when there's nothing objectively wrong right here and right now, and very much a symbol or signal, as it were, of anxiety is that worry is out of proportion to the real or perceived threat. Real or perceived threats, these are other words that are very important with anxiety. It is that feeling of there's a threat and the response or your actual reaction is the same, whether that is a real threat or perceived. And we'll get to that a little bit more shortly. The reason why I work with people with anxiety and we're all very concerned with it is it can be very debilitating. Prolonged anxiety, we get stuck, we get anxious about more things, about different things. The anxiety spreads, as it were. It becomes that generalized anxiety. And it can lead us to withdraw from things. This is linking back to that theme of connection and reconnection. When we get super anxious, we can start withdrawing from things. It all starts to feel a bit hard. Anxiety that prolongs and persists long term very often becomes linked with depression. And the other thing that will come from that longer term state of stress, inability to cope, anxiety is burnout, that prolonged mental, emotional, physical exhaustion. And it very often comes up from overwork. Work is the area that we most see burnout. Important to note it's not solely work. It can also come with caring responsibilities, especially where they're multiple. For example, the sandwich generation across caring for parents and for kids, caring for people with additional needs, extra needs who need additional support, or in particularly stressful states. So burnout, often work, often a combination of work and other things, sometimes from the other things. What I wanted to cover next is really where this all comes from, what's actually happening in our brain and in our body, when we're getting stressed, when we're getting anxious, when those things are happening. And it's funny when I sort of explain that this is our brain doing its job. When you're becoming stressed, when you're noticing anxiety, your brain is actually doing its job. And people sitting here in my sofa, people here in the office with me will very often be like, ah. And there is that sort of, all right. We can tend to think there's something wrong with us. And really, our brain is doing its job. Your brain's job is to keep you safe. That's pretty much it. And keep you safe and help us continue. Um, but your brain's job is to keep you safe. So your brain has a natural negative tendency. It's wired a bit negatively. It's set up to see threats and warn you about them. So where you're out, I mean, behind my screen is basically a window. I'm looking out at a really nice blue sky with literally two little white fluffy clouds. Beautiful day to be outdoors. So if you're outdoors, it's a gorgeous day. You think you should be smelling the flowers, all that. But your brain will be doing that scan thing that, what's that shadow? Is there something behind that tree? Is that person okay? That's just what your brain naturally does. And I guess what we will be moving to today and working on are those strategies to kind of help your brain dial that back a little bit when it's not necessary. Sometimes it is. That's why it's wired that way. I can get really into this, this is how it works and keep going. So I put myself in a bit of a natural pause. I want to show a video. Those of you here who are clients, there's every chance I've sent you a link to this previously or at least talked about it. But there's a video I'd love to share, and it's the Russ Harris Caveman Mind video. So what that is, Russ Harris is a guy. He's used to be a doctor. He now works very much as a therapist, a counselor, and he works with ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a mode I love to use. And he shares wonderful information both for practitioners and he writes self-help books. He has videos on YouTube. So he has a lot of resources, which I always encourage people to tap into and get to. I really want to share this one today, if you'll bear with me. It's a video, a YouTube clip called The Evolution of the Human Mind. I tend to refer to it as caveman mind is short. And it basically just explains that theme that I was talking about, that your brain is doing its job. Our brains are wired to look out for threats and look after us.
The human mind has evolved to think in such a way that it naturally creates psychological suffering. You see, back in the Stone Age, 200,000 years ago, life was pretty dangerous for our caveman ancestors. So if a caveman or cavewoman wanted to survive, their minds had to constantly be on the lookout for things that might hurt or harm them. And if that cave person's mind wasn't good at predicting, spotting, or avoiding danger, what happened to her? The default setting of the caveman mind was safety first. And we in the modern world have inherited this. Our modern minds are constantly warning us of things that might hurt or harm us. The caveman mind says, watch out, there might be a bear in that cave. You could get eaten. Watch out, that shadow on the horizon might be an enemy from another clan. You could get speared. Our modern mind then does worrying, predicting the worst, avoiding anything that scares you, anxiety in all of its different forms. Back in caveman days, you survive an encounter with a bear or a wolf, then it's useful to replay it. It's useful for your mind to go over the events and remember what you did to survive so that you're better prepared for next time. But in our modern world, we go over and over painful memories, dwelling on them, reliving them, even when there's nothing useful to learn or the lesson has been well and truly learned a long time ago. In the Stone Age era, as a caveman or cavewoman, you have to fit in with the group. If you are alone, you will soon die. So your mind compares you to others in the group. Am I fitting in? Am I contributing enough? Am I following the rules? Am I doing anything that might get me thrown out? Now, in modern life, we're always comparing ourselves to others. But the problem is, we're no longer in a small group. Our groups are enormous today, and we carry with us devices that constantly feed us images and stories of people all over the planet. This constant comparison ramps up our fear of being judged or rejected or not fitting in or just not being good enough. The caveman mind tells you you need more food, you need more water, better weapons, better shelter. The cave people who thought this way lived longer and had more offspring. Unfortunately, in the modern world, this manifests as greed, dissatisfaction, craving, wanting. It's never enough. I need more, more, more. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, these Stone Age thought patterns are intensified by the sheer pace and complexity of modern life. Our frantic existence, rushing from task to task, that never ending to do list. So, when your mind starts doing this unhelpful stuff, as all minds do, remember it's not defective or abnormal, and it's not deliberately trying to make your life difficult. It's simply doing the job it has evolved to do, trying to keep you safe and save you from pain.
I'll email the link to the video afterwards. Essentially, it explains that our mind evolved to keep us safe, to scan for threats. And the people who were good at that, the people who were good at going, right, there is a saber-toothed tiger, I need to run, I need to hide, I need to avoid it. The people who, lived to survive those encounters, A, learned from it and then survived the next encounters better, and B, of course, passed on those genes. So that's how our brains evolved to be a little bit negative, as it were. And also, how we developed a little bit of social anxiety. Part of surviving was fitting in with the group. You're safer in a group. So again, that tendency we have to worry about what others think of us, check out we're fitting in. It's a completely natural thing. Where we can get a bit stuck with it is where we direct our attention. Your brain, of course, follows. Your brain goes, oh, we're worried about that, we're scared about that, and makes that link, makes that connection. And that's where we can start to become stressed or anxious about recurring things. And essentially, it's like a safety switch. That expression of what wires together, fires together. So as we give more attention to something, so let's say I can currently hear a lawnmower outside, for example. The more I give attention to that lawnmower and, oh, this is terrible. Can people hear this? Is this another thing going wrong? All I can hear now is the lawnmower. My brain knows that I'm concerned about that's a threat, perceiving it as a threat, and it's directing my attention back to it. That's the idea of what wires together, fires together. So we can get stuck. We can get stuck in that fight, flight, freeze, that persistent I'm on alert, I'm looking for threats, something's going to go wrong. And when that happens in the wild, as it were, it's useful. You learn to fight that saber-toothed tiger, you learn to survive the encounter with the bear. When that happens in a setting like this, when you're looking at a computer and faced with wonky video or get an email, when your fight, flight, freeze response comes up, it's not that helpful necessarily. You're kind of sitting working through it. And that persistently and over, that's stress, anxiety, and can lead to burnout. Now, the good news is that we can change this. We can kind of rebuild that connection, as it were, between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Now, what I mean by that is that fight, flight, freeze part of your brain that happens back here in the old brain, the lizard brain, that old part of the brain, and it's instant. That's the real thing on alert. And that's a good thing. If it's a real threat, you need that instant. What works a little bit more slowly, because it's doing the logical processing, is your prefrontal cortex, the bit at the front of the brain. It'll assess the threat, it'll have a look and then send the signals to go, actually, safety brain, you can stand down, it's okay. And when we're constantly in stress and alert and anxiety, the safety brain goes off faster and quicker and becomes more powerful. So when I talk about rebuilding that connection between that amygdala, that safety brain, I should really have called it, and the prefrontal cortex, it's about making that connection stronger so that that signal goes a bit quicker. The logical brain does a bit more overriding and calms things down more quickly. Now, and of course, we rebuild that through connection. There's the theme to connection. So what I'm going to do now is move in a little bit. We're coming up to the packed self-care worksheet that I emailed out. If you didn't get it or didn't open it, don't worry. I'm going to hopefully screen share that as well and work through it. And the link, it's on my website, and I can resend the link in the email afterwards. But how we do that, in some ways, rewiring and dampening down that anxiety part of the brain, self-care is one of the things that comes up, and connection is one of the things that come up a lot with clients when I'm talking about anxiety, when I'm talking about stress, burnout. We talk about slowing down to speed up. And it's the idea of, if we're just going and going and going and not pausing, we tend to become very stuck, for want of a better word. We kind of become stuck in that, we stop seeing the bigger picture. We get really like narrow. When we slow down to speed up, we take that time to step back. That can be the really small in the moment things we talk about, of just pause, take a deep breath, reset. And that can be the bigger slowing down to speed up. In a work sense, that's things like doing extra training, learning new skills rather than go, go, go all the time. That's things like, of course, the foundations of making sure that good sleep and exercise and self-care are in place so that we're more able to deal with the everyday rolling of things. Slowing down to speed up is that idea of taking the time to sharpen your saw. I think it was the Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, for those of a similar vintage to myself. That idea of, if we take the time to sharpen our saw, sharpen our tools, make sure everything's working properly, including ourselves, everything runs more smoothly and happens better. So when I'm talking with clients about how we do this, how we slow down to speed up, how we look after ourselves, how we practice self-care, connection comes up in those like top 5 self-care tools all the time, pretty much. And coming back to our theme, the different ways to connect, connecting with yourself, connecting with community, with others, with nature, and those little pausing moments of connecting with your surroundings. So this is the self-care worksheet that I emailed out. As I say, if you haven't opened it, don't worry. I'm going to work through it here. Essentially, what I wanted was to come up with and give you a tool to use afterwards and hopefully keep using. So, and I love an acronym. I love coming up with a way for me to remember things. My memory can be a bit hazy even if I'm not stressed. So I came up with pact, and also, of course, the connection theme again, because I'm hoping we'll make a bit of a pact that we're going to practice some self-care and build a bit more self-care into our weeks. So the first step is to pause. Noticing when you feel overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, and taking that pause. Tuning into how you're feeling. So a pause, we'll just take a very brief one now. A pause can be as simple as pausing and taking a deep breath. And just refocusing. So it might be as simple as, oh, right, I'll take a deep breath, going to take a moment. Okay, and now I'm back. And it can be as simple as the pause or taking that opportunity to run through the next 3 steps. So pause and then acknowledging how you feel and accepting that you have these feelings. So by that, I mean, oh, I feel a bit stressed. Okay, I feel a bit stressed, or I feel angry, or I feel a bit flat today. Oh, this is how I feel, accepting that you have those feelings. I always want to be really clear. This is not accepting poor behaviors from others. This is not accepting a bad situation that you're in. It's not that, oh, well, I just have to put up with this. It's more accepting your own feelings. Sorry, just accepting your own feelings around this. So you kind of identify, okay, I feel flat, I feel irritable, I feel stressed, whatever it might be, and then choosing how to respond. So you've paused, you've acknowledged, now you're considering. So, and that is just looking at considering what's going to help most in this moment. The next page is a table of some different activities that might be helpful. And some are in the moment, some are your grounding type exercises, your breathing type exercises, and then some are more the proactive self-care strategies and activities, things to try and build into your life more often across the different connection themes. So having a little think, okay, what's going to be most helpful to me now? Is it an in the moment thing? Is it putting something in my schedule? What's going to be most helpful? And then just do it. So do the strategy. Put in your schedule to go to the gym, to catch up with some people. Add that self-care into your life. And then as you keep working through what works for me, what works best, adding more, adjusting it, and kind of keep going with it. So here are the self-care suggestions that I wanted to run through. What I've done basically is I filled in, as it were, a couple of suggestions under each category. So I put the four of self, community, others, and nature. I didn't actually add in my little extra, connecting to the present, connecting to the here and now category, because most of the in the moment strategies are actually doing that. I've put a little asterisk, you might notice beside those, the ones that are very in the moment. And these are the ones that, you can pretty much drop and do everywhere. I tend to suggest movement and dancing, and I do appreciate you can't necessarily, drop it and dance wherever you are, but it is an in the moment strategy. So my idea with the worksheet is I'll run through the ideas today. Then you take it away, you kind of even as we go through, notice, highlight whatever the ones that you already know work for you. I've left those spaces to add in your own favorites, and then being proactive about planning in this stuff across your week, planning in some self-care. I would also love, if time permits, to run through a few ideas for the breathing exercise, the grounding exercise type things, and I'll talk through a little bit of why these different things are helpful for us. So the in the moment ones, the other thing I've just realized I really want to say, and sorry, I'm just checking my messages in case there's any other technical things I don't know about. The other in the moment things that I really want to flag is practicing them. A little bit like when you're driving, we don't learn to do an emergency stop when we really need it. We learn and we practice to do an emergency stop when we're learning to drive so that we're able to do that quickly, reflexively when we need it. And I really encourage my clients, I really encourage you to practice the in the moment type tips so they become more of a habit. So that at those times when you recognize anxiety, stress welling up, you can just quickly grab a tip. You can pause, realize you're getting stressed and anxious. You can acknowledge what that feeling is, consider, right, what will help me now, and take action. Do it, take the deep breaths, do the stretching, but it happens in a moment because you've practiced. Meditating is the first one I want to run through. And in terms of connecting with self, meditation it's a biggie, right? Now, I mentioned earlier how when I explained to people in the room here, your brain is doing a normal thing. This is what brains do. They'll often slump and relax. I'm like, whew. If I mention meditating in the room, it tends to be more of a, huh? No, all that stuff, it gets a few different reactions. I will lovely sometimes get, oh yeah, I love meditating, but it's one of those words, meditation and mindfulness, they tend to evoke a bit of a range of reactions. For people who do want to or have an interest in meditating, there are quite a few reasons why it's been found to be really good. Now, I realize I tend to use the words mindfulness and meditation a little bit interchangeably. Uh, by meditation, I probably do mean more of a formal practice. This is not an in the moment thing. This is a taking time across the week to have that 15, 20 minutes of really just sitting, meditating, using an app or a timer, focusing on the breath, that sort of very structured meditation practice. And one of the reasons why it's become such a big thing again over recent years is just the findings in terms of how that ongoing meditation practice can help us. It's been found to have different health benefits in terms of things like lowering blood pressure, reducing experience of pain in people with chronic pain, literally been found to expand the gray matter of the brain, which is of course about forming more connections. Again, it's that connection stuff. Um, and some of the findings have been found to be greater or lesser across different studies. The overall feeling is it has multiple benefits, can actually help our body on a cellular level. So highly recommended. Now, for people who are like, oh, that formal meditation is not for me, I very much more look at everyday mindfulness. The mindfulness in the moment stuff that we can do pretty easily. It's that sort of crossover between structured, proactive self-care and stuff you can just grab in the moment. So when I say everyday mindfulness, I mean things like in the shower. Very many people will in the shower be running through the day, all the things they have to do. You're doing something that's kind of a self-care thing, right? Having a shower, but you're already in that busy mind, stress, all the things I have to do. So rather than doing that, noticing, pausing, noticing you're doing it, accepting, oh, there I am again, planning my day already, and instead tuning in, connecting with yourself, connecting with what's around you, noticing the smell of the shampoo or the soap, feeling the sensation of the water, the temperature of the water, the sound of the water, the sensations of, scrubbing, washing your hair, whatever your shower routine is. But that's one way to be mindful in the everyday. Same when you're brushing your teeth, noticing the smell of the toothpaste, the sensations. Something as simple as, making the good old cup of tea, putting the kettle on, and rather than walking away and doing seven other things, pausing, listening to the kettle boiling and noticing the steam, and then making your tea and smelling the tea, tasting the tea. I really want to sip now. Being that really in the moment. So meditation, mindfulness as a way to connect with self covers a lot of different things. And this is one of the reasons why I love working on self-care planning, because you can pick the thing that works for you. You can try different things and work out what works for you, but different ways to access that connection with self. And yeah, I'll leave it at that because I could talk about mindfulness a bit. Journaling, of course, next one is another one that we can use in different ways, and I can talk about a bit. But journaling is something that my clients find helpful, everybody finds helpful in different ways. Journaling can be a great way to acknowledge, as it were, the thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So you've paused, you've noticed stuff coming up, you know there's a lot in there. Actually journaling it, writing it down can be a great way to kind of go, oh, that's what it is, that's what I'm feeling. It can be really helpful to make connections. It can be really helpful in simply getting it out of your head and onto the page, the paper, wherever clients will come with an actual beautiful journal, or they will keep a note in their phone. I have some clients who start an email to me, as it were, and just drop notes in there, which they may or may not send. It's just a good way of getting it down onto the page and out of your head. So good for that sense of, phew, it's gone now. Good for noticing any connections or patterns. And also just good in that way of, there's a third one that I've just completely forgotten, but the next three I have that little asterisk beside them in terms of that. These are the in the moment, when you pause, the things you can grab really quickly. And the first one is the classic. It often feels like it's been overused or overstated. It's that simply taking some deep breaths. So one of the things that we often, when we're taking some deep breaths, do the really big whew, in breath. And I try to remember and help people focus on the out breath. When we do a really big out breath and really breathe out and really empty our lungs and our belly, we automatically take a deep breath back in. So that's one, just really actually recognizing, breathe out really fully, and we'll take a breath in. I found a lot of clients, particularly younger clients, are familiar with the box breathing, the breathing in and holding and out and holding type patterns. So if that's one that you know, that's great. One that I'm really starting to use with clients is known as star or 5-finger breathing. The reason I love this is, again, it's a connection reason. As well as tuning into our breath, we're also using our hand, we're using our touch, and we're using our sight. So we're using a couple of senses, which again, bringing us back to the present moment, to the here and now. So you breathe in as you slide your finger up a digit, pause, and you breathe out. And you essentially repeat across your hand as many times as you need. It's just it connects you to the here and now because you're looking at your hand. Also a great one to use if you're a parent. You can teach this to kids, and if your kid sees you doing it, it might just remind them to do it. So multiple different ways, different breathing exercises and patterns to practice, finding what works for you, practicing it so you can draw on it when you need it. Now, probably my favorite, stretching or dancing. And even if you're at work, and I'm realizing I do tend to think in terms of desk jobs, but if you're at a desk job, if you're at work, you can stretch. If you're, working outdoors, if you're working in machinery, in most situations, you can stretch. You can do like a roll of the shoulders. You can just do a few stretches, lean back in your chair, um, move your feet onto the desk. If you're in a standing job, switching your weight from one, you can move and stretch in some way. Where you can, where you're at home, where you're in a workplace, that it's fine. Dancing, just that thing, because you're using rhythm, it's a really good way to move. And the reason that movement in itself is coming up as such a great way to connect with yourself and ground yourself in the moment is it doesn't need a lot. There was a study in, I think 2 years ago now, towards the end of 2022, there was a study that found as little as 90 seconds of movement, 90 seconds can actually help shift your mood. And the reason being, of course, when you move your body, you move your brain, you literally shift your perspective. So finding ways to stretch, to move in the moment. Noticing your thoughts. So this comes back to the pausing and then acknowledging. Acknowledging and noticing, hang on, what is it? What am I stuck on? What is coming up for me right now? We very often work on autopilot, especially when we are busy, when we are stressed. So pausing and noticing your thoughts. There can be a little bit of pattern in this as well. If we realize what keeps coming up is about having too much to do, we can pause and go, well, really, do I need to do all the things? If it's about fear of letting people down, we can pause and question that. Who would I be letting down? Is this important to them? Is it just important to me? That it's reflection, right? But that noticing your thoughts, connecting with yourself and realizing, hang on, what is it I'm thinking right now? What am I stuck on? So that connection with self. So I've left, as I say, a few more spaces for you to add in your own ways that you connect with yourself and add that into the plan. But connecting with self tends to be where we can do the most in terms of the in the moment catching stuff, as well as, of course, a few great options for planned self-care, planned connection. Connecting with community. This is one where I pause. I'm pausing before saying it, but I have noticed, and I think it's probably because I lived in a smaller town in Ireland, but I have noticed a difference from Ireland to here. But I really have to temper that with the recognition that, well, I moved from a town with, 30,000 people to a city, to Brisbane. It's just bigger, right? And I love that because there are more opportunities to go out and do things, but it sometimes feels like there's less of that local connection. And of course, community also doesn't have to be local. Even as I'm saying that, I'm remembering one of the things I want to talk about is online community. But we can connect with our community in different ways. That can be by volunteering in a local thing, volunteering, there's different ways. There's Meals on Wheels type stuff. There's volunteering currently by, for example, doing something for your political party. If you have a political party you support, you're part of that community. So doing something in that. Simply saying hi to a neighbour. And we have a neighbour who's unfortunately moving in the next few weeks. They have their first open house today. So we spent some time this week getting out and mowing our lawn and weeding and making sure that we look good so that they look good. And it's a small, but having that connection with neighbours is great. Joining a community group, that can be physical in your locale or online. There are different communities online for professional interests, for hobbies, for I'm in one called Brisbane Mums from Overseas, for example. So people who have similar experiences. Oh, I'm also in one for people with celiac disease. So communities can be about different aspects of your life, but that being part of a community, part of a group with similar concerns, interests type thing, that connection from that way. Connecting with others, there's sort of an overlap, but not really. Community is more about those groups. Others tends to be your people, as it were, the family or the friends or the people that you know, the colleagues, making time, spending good time with them, making time to catch up, planning a catch up, messaging or calling a friend. Look, I actually probably should have put a little in the moment asterisk beside this one as well, because when we're feeling a bit caught, stuck, whatever, we can message or call a friend. Always with that caution of it's not always about here's the person who I dump stuff on, but just a hey, oh, I was feeling a bit flat, so I wanted to hear your voice. How are you? What are you up to? Um, so that sort of quick connection. Joining a support group, that is, I suppose in the way I mentioned that with the celiac group, people who have similar concerns. Different ways to connect with other people tends to be much more of a proactive strategy. We plan to catch up. There's also an element of a connecting in the moment, connecting in the here and now. When you're with family and friends, mentally being there as well, and not just physically. So doing that kind of when you realize, again, pausing when you realize you're stuck in your head, pausing and doing the hang on, I'm with these people. Let me be with these people and tune back into them. Like connection, it's just important by staying connected to other people. You're actually not just improving your own well-being, but theirs as well. And there are some people in the webinar today who know how much I love connection with nature. Uh, walking is the classic. So as a counsellor, I offer walk and talk counselling where we get outdoors, we go for a stroll. Sometimes we don't so much walk and talk as sit and chit, depending. I have a few parents. I was going to say mums, it is mostly mums. I have a few parents where, Bob is actually with us in the pram, and sometimes we walk if they're sleeping. If it's a toddler, sometimes we actually pause at a playground, sit on a bench type thing. But getting out into nature, one of the most wonderful ways to connect, and walking is that great way to do it. For many people, it's an easily accessible, not of course for everybody, but yeah, getting outside and walking. I love to walk by myself as well as walking with clients and with friends. When I walk by myself, I am paying attention to what's around me. When I'm walking with a friend or a client, I'm connected with them. Why I've started as an in the moment thing is, again, very depending on the situation, the workplace, etc. It can be an in the moment. Taking a moment when you realize you're stuck to get up and walk away from your desk, go fill your water bottle, make a cup of tea, that type of thing. Walking outside, taking advantage of, if you have an opportunity to have a break, if it's close to lunchtime, taking your lunch outside, but getting up and moving and walking and going outside if you can. Um, Something that I actually just mentioned, I've been doing some weeding and tidying up outside to, tidy up my house because my neighbour's selling theirs. But getting outside and gardening is just fabulous for connecting with nature, literally getting your hands into the dirt and that smell that you get. I love it. And I'll digress slightly. I'll keep an eye on time, but I was listening to a podcast recently. It was one of the ABC podcasts, and it was an interview with Po Ling Yao, who's been on MasterChef, and she talked about gardening, and I love Po anyway, but she talked about gardening in the sense of groundedness, the how much we as a society, I guess, have lost connection with nature and seasons and that stuff. So she talked about gardening, putting in the effort to grow something, particularly in terms of things that she cooks with, that you just got so much more appreciation of what it takes to grow strawberries, of what it takes to grow green beans, and also just the mental switching off of being there and doing it and being in the moment. So for those who do, gardening's fabulous. For those who don't, maybe grow a herb. Um, Exercising outside, another absolute favorite, and I do always recognize and temper this with the I believe the majority of you here in the webinar today are local, as it were, from around the Brisbane or Queensland area. I mean, it is, after all, Queensland Mental Health Week. Um, it can get too hot for us to do this a little bit, but where we can exercise outside, that can be just a walk, getting out for a jog, using that exercise equipment that's around so many parks. One of the walks I do myself, I'll do a walk after school drop off. I'll often see a group doing the outdoor boot camp type thing. It's just a great way to be outside. So getting outside to exercise and being clear that that exercise doesn't have to be full on. We're not training for a marathon. It's about moving your body in the outdoors. And the last one I've put into my suggestion list is this: do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 outside. Now, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'll talk through briefly. But this is also where it's a little bit of this is almost that fifth category again of connecting with your surroundings, because we can do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 everywhere. And it's a great in the moment type exercise. So while I talk through it, I'm actually going to hop back out of the screen share. We've all got the sheet. I'm going to stop the share and talk through the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I think that way I feel I'm a bit more connected back with the group. I'm kind of back here in the room. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is one of those strategies that I'm so sorry for those of you here who are or have been clients, because you will have heard this. You will have heard me do this and talk about this, but you know what? It's always really good to have a reminder. It's just one of those things that we can use in so many situations when we realize we're like, oh, any form, right, of angry, anxious, stressed. When we have that real, we're caught up, we're stuck, we're just on alert. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pause and use it. It's such a good way to come back to the here and now. And I really want to make sure I'm linking back to why this works. So in the video / audio from the Russ Harris Caveman Mind, we recognize that the fight, flight, freeze is that thing where we are having that alert, we're having that, it switches on and we're like ready to fight. And we don't always need to. There's not always an actual threat. It's sometimes that perceived threat. We can get that response sitting in traffic. If somebody beeps at us, we will often get that, and in that moment, we're still getting the same reaction, the alert, the adrenaline, but fighting is not a good idea. I know it happens, and it often happens with terrible consequences, so not a good response. Flight, well, you start to drive off. You drive into the car in front, you drive through a red light, again, not a great idea. And freeze, you end up frozen at the light. So it's just not helpful in that moment. So when we realize that we're having that alert and it's not useful, being able to do something like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 instead connects us to where we actually are, helps us realize there's not a physical threat, helps rebuild that connection to the here and now, so we go, oh, I'm actually somewhere that there is no saber-toothed tiger, there is no warring tribe, I'm safe. I can stand down. Safety brain, you can stand down. Logical brain is back. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is essentially, what are 5 things I can see? And so I think I mentioned I'm sitting here and I've got the window to outside. So I might look for rectangles. I like patterns. The rectangle of my screen, the rectangle of the window, the rectangle of the solar panels in the house across the street. You looking into the room might be like, oh, 5 green things, because, I'm so Irish. We've got the plant, we've got the chairs, we've got my necklace that I'm wearing, looking for a pattern. Or it might be simply, I see a window, I see a desk. But what are 5 things that help remind me that I'm currently safe? What are 4 things I can feel? This is often the sense that people find most helpful. A lot of people will have one sense that they tune into, and feel it can be very grounding. Right back at the start, I did the sitting back in your chair, feeling the chair supporting you. And if it's the only part of this that you practice and do, for many it's super helpful. If you're at work and you're stressed and you're tense, you're often up on your computer, or depending what you do, if you're working on an assembly line, you are often, I mean, we don't do that as much anymore, but anyway, we tend to be forward and tense. If you sit back in the chair and relax and feel it supporting you, you also naturally tend to stretch back your shoulders. You take a deeper breath. It just has that little sneaky almost way of, it's feeling the chair supporting you. Same in the car. Also in the car, feeling the steering wheel, relaxing your grip on it. I'm at a desk, feeling the desk, like feeling the texture of it, feeling the ground beneath your feet, literally grounding, feeling what the air temperature is. If you're outside, feeling the sun or the breeze, feeling the aircon, just what can you feel? And you can proactively, oh, I feel this detail. It can also be a fidget thing. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear. Right now, you're hearing my voice. Been hearing it a bit. I can hear my aircon. The street outside is actually quiet, no fire truck going past. But yeah, tuning into what you can hear. Again, this is why it's so beautiful to do outdoors. You'll be hearing insects, you'll be hearing birds. One of the places I walk, 2 of the places I walk are near a stream. You can hear the water, so tuning into what you hear. 2 things that you can smell. This is where it gets a little more tricky if it turns out that smell is very grounding for you. Also, sorry, the being aware that for some people, different senses are not helpful. Smell can bring back, for example, particularly some not great things. So skip that one if that's you. Um, my cup of tea is back as a prop. You can smell the tea. You can taste the tea. So things you can smell. If it turns out that's a good sense for you, things like carrying around a chapstick that has a scent and a taste. And similarly for taste, it might just be take a sip of water, sip of tea. Just notice what flavors in your mouth. So that's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's a way to pause, ground, and come back to the here and now, essentially. So I think I have a last slide. That's a lot of what I wanted to cover. I really wanted to work through the worksheet and give you those suggestions of here are some ways, excuse me, that you can build self-care in the moment, connection rather in the moment, and also building it in as a self-care plan, adding in some things across your week that you know that work for you. In terms of the what's next, I just wanted to kind of flag these like next steps, as it were. So we're pretty much coming to the end. Obviously, I'll be super happy with any questions. I'll check the Q&A in a moment. I will email you. I mentioned when I was talking about why connection really resonated with me, why this theme, why I did the webinar. I've done a few blogs recently on burnout and on self-care, and I think I mentioned boundaries as well. So I'll email a link to the blog section of my website. I already had planned to, the link to that Ross Harris video. I'm really hoping that we all go away and look at the self-care plan, make a bit of a plan of what works for us, what we enjoy, adding in our own suggestions, putting that into practice in terms of that proactive self-care plan, in terms of practicing those in the moment, pausing, breathing, grounding exercises, and practicing that pact, that pausing and acknowledging, considering, and taking action. I'm not going to labor this one. I'll put it in the email as well. But I am starting at the end of this month. I want to launch the test, as it were, of a self-paced anxiety program. And for that, I'm of course looking for some volunteers to test it and to do some testimonials. I'll include in the email if you're interested in that. Essentially, it'll be around a 6-week program, self-paced. Normally, once it's ready and in production, as it were, the full program I'm imagining will cost around $200. So I'm offering the free test version of it for volunteers. Would love to have you on board. And I also, of course, want feedback on the webinar, and I'll include that in the email as well. And I better include a question on the technical skills of your presenter. I'm going to hop out of this screen now and stop the share so that I can see and get any questions that you have. So really, any questions, anything that I've covered that you want me to explain or elaborate, or if there's anything like that, please throw them into the Q&A. And while you're potentially typing away, I just obviously want to thank you for coming along today. Oh, right. Yes. Sorry. The question in terms of I am really busy. How does pausing help? Where I suppose I partly covered that was in the idea of the taking time to stop and sharpen your saw, even where you have objectively a lot on. When you take the moment and when you're able to step back and take the bigger view, as it were, It may help you weed out some of the things that you have on. It may help give that perspective of, hang on, do I have to do all the things? Are these all my things? Do I need to do them now, etc.? It can just help the logic brain, as it were, switch back on and go, oh, actually, hang on, this doesn't have to happen now, or I don't have to do this. If it does turn out, well, no, actually, yes, I do have to do all these things, they are mine. Just that pausing helps you be focused on the one thing you're doing at that time. We tend to think, and it's something I didn't cover, it wasn't really part of this, but we tend to think that multitasking is the answer. And it's very much been found that it's not the answer. When we multitask, we're actually less efficient, not a favorite word, but we're less efficient because we're task switching. So when you pause and make sure you're focusing on one thing at a time, you'll actually do it better. So the pausing, even where it is where you do actually objectively have all the things, the pausing and refocusing on that one thing that you're doing does help you get through it more easily. And then, as I say, best case scenario, you might recognize they're not all your things, that you can get rid of them, that you can park some. So that's how even when you really do have all the things, that can help. So great question, thank you. Any other nothing else popping up at the moment. Look, I'll hang in here for another few minutes anyway, if you also want to hang in and have questions. Remembering, by the way, that your questions don't show up, I don't believe, to the group anyway. So no worries on that. Or if you're done, look, basically, thank you. Thank you so much for coming along.